Good evening, everybody. So today we have actually assembled over here for a brief overview on cryptocurrencies as well as blockchain technology. So when I'm actually talking of cryptocurrency and blockchain, these two terminologies, in fact, even 10 years back, not many of us would have actually even known about. So how many of you have heard of cryptocurrencies or blockchain? Please raise up your hands. That's excellent. So all of you are actually been aware of cryptocurrencies and blockchains, and you have actually been in touch with the markets. So if you typically go through the internet, you'll find a lot of innovations which have happened in terms of fintech. So this particular terminology called fintech is actually used very widely all over the world. So what is fintech? Fintech actually stands for financial technologies in terms of basically what exactly are the innovations and disruptions which have happened over the last few decades as well as the last few centuries, in fact, in the last couple of millennia, so to speak, and even before that. So could you please go to the next slide? So when we are actually talking of financial technologies and what exactly are the different disruptions and innovations which have happened, not many of you would have actually observed that even the gold nuggets which were developed in order for basically to replace the barter system is actually a kind of a fintech innovation which has happened. In terms of what exactly are gold nuggets, these specific gold nuggets were actually dug up and it is actually used as a store of value. So when you're actually in prehistoric times, there used to be only a barter system whereby people used to exchange one good for another. But then when gold nuggets were actually used, it was, in other words, basically a store of value which could actually make it more easy for people to actually exchange goods and services. So as and when basically we progress across the prehistoric times, we have various other innovations which have taken place. We have, in fact, more recently, you can say in 1950s and 1960s, we had the development of ATM machines. Even that was actually an innovation, so to speak. Why ATMs? Because ATMs are actually like replacing branch banking to a great extent. So you don't need to go to a bank in order to withdraw funds. So it is possible for you to actually go to an ATM and you can actually withdraw funds, and it is actually reducing the extent of load on branches. So that is also a fintech innovation. So you have various other types of fintech innovations. More recently, in the last couple of decades, we can see actually the blooming of internet, and with internet being widely used and bandwidth also basically being available and access to internet becomes more easy. So we have a lot of other new technologies which have come up, like peer-to-peer lending more recently. So you've got a lot of innovations which have enabled people to actually borrow funds and also raise capital online. There is also crowdfunding which is taking place. So you have a lot of innovations in terms of the fintech sector is concerned. Now, why exactly are we talking of this particular innovations on fintech side? This is because it is actually making our life more easy. It is enabling entities to actually raise capital to a greater extent. It's more easy. The cost of transactions is actually decreased drastically. You have a complete elimination as far as the transaction costs are concerned in terms of cross-border payments. Like in the last couple of decades, some of you might have actually used a money exchange. Say if you want to remit funds from abroad to India, or basically you want to send money for your education abroad, it is easy for you to actually transfer funds through payment exchanges or through banks. So, but then banks as well as to a great extent, they have actually transaction costs which you'll be incurring, because there is always a transaction cost in terms of exchanging one currency for another currency. Now, welcome to the world of blockchain technology and cryptocurrencies. It's actually a fantastic innovation, and in fact, many of you might be thinking that it's actually Greek and Latin to me. I mean, like, it's very complicated and it's very difficult to understand. But then over the next half an hour, we'll be able to check out what exactly is blockchain technology, and it is nothing but a database. It is nothing but a database similar to an SQL database. You have a storage of information in this blockchain. So what you call a blockchain is actually nothing but a series of computers which are connected to each other over the internet. So these computers are called nodes. So all these nodes, they're actually high-end servers which are there on the internet. It is possible for the information to be broken down into bits and stored in all these computers. That's all. It's nothing but a database similar to an SQL database. Only thing is that it's basically a distributed database. So over here, we have actually touched based on what is called a distributed database. So this distributed database, we will see in progressively how exactly it is able to mitigate the risk for its participants. How is it possible for you to keep track of your transactions? How is it become more easy through this fintech innovation to do cross-border transactions and to remit funds, and there is no intermediary going to be in between, and your transaction costs are going to be eliminated to a great extent. So that is precisely what we'll see in the next few slides. Yeah. Some of the other fintech innovations which have recently we could actually witness is all of you must have heard of what you call Robinhood as well as Zerodha. So these are actually brokerage services which has made it more easy for discount brokers, who have made it more easy for people to actually trade on exchanges, and basically like it is easy for typically, the extent of reach of stock markets has actually extended to retail investors. So Robinhood as well as Zerodha, and you have a lot of other innovations in private banking, wealth management, which has actually helped to a great extent, say basically like for people to make decisions, because in the last decade and a half, we could actually see the advent of data analysis. In fact, some of you might be pursuing already careers in data science and data analysis. Data science with what you call big data. And you got machine learning technologies, which has actually evolved, so to speak, basically, automated systems which will enable you to make decisions for your investments, for wealth management. You have, for example, robo-advisors which actually provide you information on how to go about making your investment decisions. So there are actually like a lot of data analytic systems, automated systems using artificial intelligence, which can actually provide you insight on how to go about managing your wealth, for example, financial planning. So this is the extent to which fintech has actually evolved in the last decade and a half. And in the last few decades, we could actually see with the increase in reach of internet, with more people actually using internet to a great extent, it is possible for cost to decrease and the reach as well as sophisticated systems to emerge. So it was way back in 2009 that blockchain technology actually came into being. So could you please go to the next slide? So what is actually this blockchain, so to speak? What is a blockchain? A blockchain is nothing but, as I mentioned, basically a series of nodes where you have actually the data stored. Now these nodes are nothing but computers. Now you must have heard of the SQL database or SQL database. SQL database stores the information in a sort of fields. You got rows of information and it is structured and it is stored in the database, so to speak. And in this particular concept of blockchain, the same data is actually broken up and it is stored in a series of nodes. Now, these particular nodes are nothing but computers which are there on internet. So, for example, Bitcoin is what you call a public blockchain. Please note the word of public. It's a public blockchain where it is possible for anybody and everybody to see what exactly makes up the blockchain. It is possible for us to actually go through basically the blockchain data, and it is possible for us to actually, in fact, look at the zeros and ones, but then you will not be able to identify what exactly the data is all about. So that is actually a public blockchain. We'll also see what are private blockchains or permission blockchains subsequently. But then note this word called blockchain. It's a distributed ledger. When I'm calling it a distributed ledger, it's nothing but a database where the information is actually stored in nodes. It's computers all across the internet, and the data is actually encrypted using a cryptography algorithm, which we'll discuss subsequently what exactly it is. So we have actually a cryptography algorithm which actually encrypts the data and it stores it. Now, here we have a very interesting problem, so to speak. What is a major problem in this particular context? Suppose you have a bank where you have your savings bank account and you want to remit funds to another country, cross-border payments. So the bank knows who you are. The bank has done what you call a KYC. What is KYC? Know your customer. They've got possibly your passport or your Aadhaar card details or whatever it is, whatever is your KYC document. So they know who Venkat is, they know who XYZ person is, and it is possible for the bank to identify who's going to be the beneficiary of your remittance. In other words, basically to whom you're actually going to transfer the funds. But then in a distributed ledger, nobody knows who exactly the particular entity which is sending funds or receiving funds is. The transaction is directly a peer-to-peer transaction. What do you mean by peer-to-peer? So the sender of the funds sends the data to the beneficiary or the receiver of the funds, and it is only the transaction which is understood and basically which is acknowledged by only these two parties. But then how is that kind of a transaction going to be accepted? How is this kind of a transaction going to be acknowledged, so to speak, by this distributed ledger mechanism? That is actually the crux of the blockchain technology. Now, some of you might have heard of what you call a Byzantine's problem in game theory. This is a very interesting problem. What happened is Byzantium was a city, and there were a lot of generals with armies which were actually going to attack Byzantium. So they surrounded the city, but then all these generals, they did not know basically whether they could trust the other generals or not. See, suppose some of the generals think that, okay, fine, we have to actually attack the city. There'll be some other generals who might back off, and ultimately it might lead to chaos, you know. So you'll have actually an attack on the city only from one side. So this is typically the problem which is actually solved by blockchain. In blockchain, typically, as I told you, there are nodes or computers on the internet. So there are close to around 80,000 to 85,000 computers or nodes for Bitcoin, for example. Let us take the example of Bitcoin, which is a public blockchain. Now, out of these 80,000 nodes, 51% of the nodes have to agree that this particular transaction is valid. So it is 51% of the total number of nodes. If they agree that a particular transaction is valid, then it means that the transaction is actually proven to be basically genuine, and the transaction is basically like, you know, it is accepted. It is acceptable by all the nodes. Now, you would ask me, what if somebody actually goes and basically like captures 51% of the 80,000 nodes, that is close to around 41,000 computers approximately on the internet. But then the cost of doing that is going to be astronomically high, and till now it has not been done. Okay, over the last 10 years, this is actually a proven concept that these particular nodes have not been, so to speak, basically the majority of the nodes have not been hacked. So this is where you refer to the blockchain being what is called immutable. Please note, when I'm talking of immutability of data, what I'm meaning is that basically I meant that basically it's not that the data cannot be changed, but the point is when it actually comes to what you call a consensus algorithm. So all these 80,000 computers or nodes, they have to come to a consensus. So 51% of these nodes have to come to a consensus that the particular data is actually genuine. For example, if you have transferred Bitcoins, say from one country to another, this particular transaction has to be validated. Now, this validation of this transaction data is done by what you call a consensus algorithm. So this consensus algorithm is nothing but basically, it is actually typically a cryptography related concept. For example, you have a very famous algorithm which Bitcoin uses. It's called SHA-256. That is the name of the algorithm. So these are called what you call hash functions. Okay, now these are hash functions, so to speak. These hash functions, don't be bogged down with the terminology. So it takes time for you to get used to the terminology. It's over a period of time that you'll get a understanding of what exactly different terminologies imply. But the so-called hash function enables the data to be encrypted before it is stored in these nodes. So once I actually basically suppose some XYZ counterparty, it buys Bitcoins. Okay, this particular information about the transaction is encrypted and it is stored in the node. This encryption algorithm is called SHA-256. Okay, now similarly there are different types of algorithms which are the cryptography algorithms. So the data is actually encrypted. Now this SHA-256, for example, it consists of 256 bits. This 256 bits actually can be compressed into 64 hexadecimal digits. Now, let us not get into the complexities of it. So, it's going to be encrypted and it is going to be stored. Now, the best part is this particular algorithm is so sophisticated, and the blockchain technology uses similar types of consensus algorithms in such a way that if there is any particular change of even a single bit in these 256 bits, it is possible for all the nodes to identify that this particular information has been tampered with. Okay, it's not that you cannot tamper it, but the point is all the 51% of the nodes simultaneously, for them to be tampered, it requires a huge investment in power, computing power. So it's not possible for everybody to actually anybody to hack 51% of the nodes at the same time. It becomes very difficult. I would not say it's impossible, but then it requires a huge lot of computing power. So till date, last 10, 11 years, it's not been done. So that is actually the benefit of this particular technology, which actually uses a consensus algorithm to ensure that the data is actually validated and verified. So once this particular hash function or the cryptography algorithm, the consensus algorithm, it actually validates the data, then it means that this particular data is actually genuine and it is stored in the system. So in future also, this particular data cannot be changed. So I'm not going to get into the next part of it. We'll see subsequently what are public keys and private keys and so on. But then that is actually a concept which we will actually be discussing elaborately subsequently. Yeah. So you have actually different types of blockchains in the world. So you have actually blockchain technology which uses a specific consensus algorithm and a specific way in which the data is actually stored in the system. Now you can also develop tokens or smart contracts on top of these blockchains which you have. So you got actually the evolution of technology which will encompass different concepts of blockchain technology, and basically how exactly you can utilize them. We'll see what are the applications of the blockchain technology. Now, one very important aspect which I want to share with you is that it is not necessary for you to, this blockchain technology is not only used for the cross-border transactions of payments. That is not the only objective of having a blockchain technology. If you have followed the news more recently, in fact, a lot of banks, international banks as well as financial institutions, they've actually started, and corporate also, they've started using the blockchain technology for their own business applications. These are actually what you call a private blockchain system. So in this private blockchain system, it is possible for you to, basically launch your own blockchain network, a kind of a closed network, whereby you, the corporate and its customers can actually utilize these blockchain coins or tokens in order for them to actually do the transactions internally. Now, what is the benefit of this? It would actually make it easy for their customers to actually exchange these coins for one coin to another coin. Let me explain to you. You must have used Ola Money, for example. Yeah, Ola Money or Paytm Money as well as Amazon Pay. And in international markets, there are already Uber coins. So Uber has actually launched its own coin, and basically it is possible for you to actually keep track of basically any particular exchange rate which is there with other currencies. So you have a lot of innovations which have happened internationally. India is still yet to basically see a large scale innovation. We are waiting for the regulatory bill to come up. But more importantly, you got actually the application of blockchain technology across various businesses. So assume that instead of Ola Money, you transferring rupees, you buy Ola coins. And today, you bought close to around 5,000 Ola coins, thinking that you might use it for transportation, for travel. But then tomorrow, you might not have used all the coins. So you can actually exchange the Ola coins, say for, say Paytm coins or Geo coins, for example. And it is possible for you to actually, if these coins are actually listed on the exchange, there is an exchange rate which will be visible in the market. So it is possible for you to buy one coin for another coin. So this is a very, very good example whereby instead of actually, instead of actually asking Ola Money to transfer the funds back to your bank account and then once again buying Paytm, use the funds for say buying something on JioMart. It is possible for you to actually, exchange the Ola coins directly for Geo coins or for say Paytm coins, and you can actually use it for different purposes. So this is one classic example whereby it is possible for you to actually use blockchain technology to keep your customers happy, to reduce the transaction cost, because every time you transfer funds to the bank and back out of the bank, it's going to take time. It's also going to cost you, there's going to be transaction costs, transaction charges, you'll have to bear with the transaction charges. So this is a very classic example how blockchain technology can be used by corporate for business applications.